My short answer is yes, you can use a lot of online resources to bring yourself up to speed on stuff that is the cerebral stuff, right? So the stuff that you're like learning, like if you want to learn how to do advanced math, for example, right? There are like hundreds of different math tutors all over the internet that do videos on how to do advanced math for example purposes. So yeah, you can do stuff like that. As far as testing is concerned, well, that really kind of depends. Most people are still stuck in the slave mentality. They're still, like there's a reason, and I try not to go into this stuff too much because I'm trying not to burn people too hard, but a lot of people are still stuck in the slave mentality of go work for somebody else, and as opposed to start your own company. See, none of my employees have ever asked if I had a diploma in anything. None of my employees, none of my subcontractors, none of the people who've worked for me in the past have ever bothered to stop and say, Axel, man, where's all your diplomas and certificates? I'd like to see these things. And let me call and get some references from the college you attended. No one has ever done that to me. No one has ever asked me if I had a high school diploma. Nobody has ever cared. What they cared about is, did the check that I wrote them cleared? That's what they care about. Okay? So, yeah, and if you're aware, I don't come from money at all. I was abandoned as a kid, so I don't come from any of this stuff. I come from the real world, so to speak. Okay, so it's why I have the opinions that I do, and it's why I'm able to actually speak with the authority that I have, because I've actually earned the authority. Nobody bestowed upon me authority, which is all most diplomas or certificates or plaques or degrees or ribbons or all these different honorifics. They usually are. It's just somebody else bestowing upon you this idea that, oh yes, this person can, that's all it is. It's sort of an appeal to authority, if you want to call it that. That's all most of it is. So as far as testing is concerned, whatever. I never cared about back in the days of doing martial arts. I never cared about a belt color. I never bothered with any of the belt tests. I didn't care about that. What I cared about was the result that what I was able to actually perform physically. That's what I cared about. I don't really care about the accolades from other people. To me, that's kind of a low frequency kind of thing, and it doesn't mean that I don't necessarily like those things. And I know that other people love that kind of attention, right? And I don't mean that in a negative way. There's lots of people there's sales organizations that have these award ceremonies and so forth. Sort of like, there's a Rick and Morty episode where Jerry gets an award for best Apple advertisement. Like, some people need that kind of reassurance, in their life. Again, it's not me picking on anybody at all. Some people need that, and it's actually a failure of mine because I don't recognize a lot of that stuff. So for me, I just blow right past it, and I don't even think about it, and it's a shortcoming of mine. It's one that I do know about, by the way. I'm well aware of it. I do try to remember that with people. It just doesn't work because I'm not that way, right? I don't care about awards or ceremonies and what I care about is, does the check clear? Does the check that you wrote me, am I going to cash this and get the result that I want, right? Because I don't work for any other reason other than to produce a result, and that result has to be at least in my case, is twofold. Number one is what the customer wanted, and number two is did I get what I want out of the deal? That's it. It's really that simple. So, using the internet, you can leverage it a lot because you could get a lot of information from the internet, and you can get a ton of information about it. I don't do that here. I've thought about actually doing a subscriber only type class where I would actually answer specific business related questions and problems that I've had and have had to overcome in my tenure in 35, almost 36 years in the industry in business. And so, yeah, I've thought about doing these kinds of things. I haven't done it yet. I haven't pulled the trigger on something like that because that becomes highly specific. It becomes a lot of work at that point, and I have a lot of work already. So, but as far as testing out, I don't know. It just depends. I would suggest. I would tell you this. Most companies are not going to be doing a whole lot of hiring going forward. They really can't. Truth, Trump is probably going to flood the country with more illegals, which is just as bad as flooding the country with illegals. It's actually worse because it codifies it, right? And it just means that, okay, now it's permanent. There's no hope of having wages come up. Now the wages are going to basically be flat. And unfortunately, as inflation continues, and inflation is not going away. Inflation is a mathematical reality at this point. No one is going to pull the plug on all those agencies. I know that there's all this fun and games that Elon Musk and Vivek and so on. We're going to start talking about all this government waste. Government waste has been around as long as government has been around, and there's always somebody who does an expose on government waste. But it doesn't hit as hard when you say, hey, we're going to get rid of this wasteful government thing. That's one way of saying it. The other way I might say it is, the following agencies, you're all fired, and get your shit and get out. You have you're going to get your 6 months of severance pay or something like that, but you are all wasteful, and your services are no longer required. So here is the walking papers for some 8 or 9 million federal employees. That hits completely different than, oh, look at all this waste. Yeah, hits totally different, and no one has the sack to do that. None of these people. Trump is creating the cabinet of the who's who of daytime television or whatever the hell he's doing. There is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow on this. There is no cuts. There's no actual cuts that are coming, like real genuine, actual cuts where agencies are abolished. That unconstitutional agencies like the ATF are wholesale abolished. It's not happening. It's not happening. They're never going to get rid of all that stuff. I'd be very surprised to be wrong on this, right? I mean, I'd love to be wrong on this. I'd love to be doing a video and say, oh my God, I was totally wrong. Look at this. They got rid of 50 alphabet agencies. and they did not replace it with anything. They didn't lateral them to some other place. No, it's not going to happen. And by the way, even if that happened, that would flood the job market with even more people, right? So yeah, I mean, my suggestion to most people anymore at this point is, if you're looking for shelter, if you're looking for a savior, you're about to get a lesson in what it's like to live in the real world. And I don't mean you specifically. The person I'm talking about just anybody. You're about to get a lesson in what it's like to be in the real fucking world, where you have to wake up and you have to figure out how you're going to survive. Because that boomer shit, where they sent all the jobs to China to bail it out, because they're like, oh, well, look at how awesome is China. I saw somebody post that, well, why is it that communist China is doing so wonderfully? Because we sent them our industry. That's why China's doing so wonderfully. And they're not even doing that wonderfully. They have a lot of problems in China. But that's why we sent all those jobs, so that to make sure that boomers could continue to have their 401ks go look like they're getting bigger and bigger, so they can feel rich. That's the reality. So yeah, I mean, I hate to say it this way, a bunch of sellouts as far as I'm concerned, but there be no shelter here. The front line is everywhere. It's the truth. Okay, so try to find stuff that you can do that you are in business for yourself, and ideally not beholden to a large corporation to provide you with your products that you're selling, or if you're manufacturing something, take up like machining or something like that. I mean, like these are just things that people can do if they have the place to put all this stuff. And that's the other problem. That's the reason, by the way, not to bore you with this, but that's the reason, by the way, they don't want people owning land. If you own 2 acres of land, you can build a machine shop. You can start making stuff. Oh boy. We can't have that, because then you'll compete against all these giant mega corporations that are making garbage products out of the worst possible materials they could find, right? We have only to look at the so-called food substitutes we find at all of these fast food garbage places. So I hope that answers your question.